All right, I believe we are live, and I have muted audio so we won't hear the live video, which is on delay. Is that looking okay for you, Nick?
Yeah, everything looks good on this end.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Cool. Yeah, Dave, I heard Nick telling you, asking you about the talk you did with Tara, and I know that that video will be ready tomorrow on our platforms.
Oh, awesome! Yeah,
awesome.
no, I think it's a fun one, and yeah, I was saying I really like videos where it's kind of interactive, and you have a student and not a student, but someone who's learning and someone who's teaching, and it works really well.
Exactly. Awesome. Yeah. So when we get started, I'll remind the audience that they can also look at that for another one of your resources. Start tomorrow on our video series pages.
Oh, cool. Good. That sounds great.
Yeah. We'll make sure to share with you too, so you can see how good it looks.
Yeah. I think I saw. I looked at a draft. And,
okay. Cool.
And then sent just a couple little comments, and I think so. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
You gotta get used to talking YouTube time. If someone's watching this video, a few days from now, you can't say the video's coming out tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
So you know what you do. You gotta go with the YouTuber stuff, like check out our video on the channel, click there, click here.
Check out Technovation's Instagram, Facebook accounts. A video
exactly.
Live.
Check out TikTok. Yeah.
April 23rd. April 23rd is what I meant by tomorrow.
It's surprisingly fun to do this stuff. I had no idea I've been waiting for so long to say those words.
That's funny. Yeah.
Dave, how have courses been going post virtual world?
It's okay. Yeah, we meet at each class session and try to do discussions. Zoom has breakout sessions, which are nice. So like I can put 2 students in 10 breakout rooms and then kind of go and talk to them where they can ask questions. And but it's different, it's not the same as in person. And
sure,
I have a very interactive classroom, and so we can kind of do that with Zoom, but it's going better than, but I guess I thought it would.
That's good.
Yeah,
good. It's good it's going at all. I know.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
The teachers are struggling just to even move it forward.
Yeah, exactly. Doing the best we can.
Yeah.
I just feel sorry for all the youngsters in the world. It's just pretty rough.
I know. I know my niece is a 5th grader in Long Beach in this last year of elementary school, and she was so looking forward to spring activities for her final year. There's all kinds of stuff, and that she'll just get dropped into middle school at some point. So
yeah, my son's a senior, and so he's missing mainly what he cares about is not the prom, but like the parties during senior year.
Celebration.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're tuned in early, we feel for you youngsters. We really do.
Yeah, right, for sure.
Let's see. We'll give it just another minute. All right, we are at noon Pacific time, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone that's tuning in or that's viewing this recorded video at a later date. It's great to have you viewing our Technovation webinar on Thunkable troubleshooting. My name is Bryant Gomer. I am the Senior Director of Mentor Engagement and External Relations at Technovation. I'm joined by my colleague, Nick. Nick, do you want to give a quick introduction?
I'm Nick. I'm on the programs team, so you'll see me around here and there. I'm here to talk with Dave today. So Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm a University of San Francisco professor in computer science, and I focused the last few years on kind of beginning coding, and especially with App Inventor and Thunkable and blocks languages. And at USF we kind of helped do some of the building of the App Inventor system. I've had students work on that, but we've also built a lot of educational materials. And so some of you may out there may have used appinventor.org. There's a bunch of videos there for doing things. And there's a book called App Inventor 2 that I authored or co-authored some years ago. And anyway, the last year I've been teaching with Thunkable, and I love the language, and I look forward to talking about it.
Awesome. Yeah, just a couple things to go over before we dive right into it. If you're tuning in live, you're welcome to use the YouTube chat function and type in some questions for Dave. This is a Thunkable related webinar, so any of your Thunkable questions. If you're a member of the Technovation community, we know there's about 2 weeks until submission from today. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd. So we're getting close to submission. So yeah, type those questions in there. We'll try and get them to Dave. I know Dave's going to be going over a few helpful links and resources, and we'll try and drop all of those into the description within the next 24 hours too, so you can rewatch this video and see the links Dave's talking about. And lastly, Dave also pre-recorded a video with our CEO and founder, Tara, that should be live on our Solve It video series starting tomorrow, Thursday, April 23rd. You can find that on our Instagram, our Facebook channels, all over our social media if you're tuned in there. And then lastly, I just want to thank all of our participants who submitted questions before this video. I know we sent out a call to action on our social media channels. We got some great questions. A lot of them centered around databases and user logins. So this first portion, Dave's going to specifically do a presentation on databases and user logins to kind of address those questions at large. So I think from there, Dave, you're welcome to take it away and share your screen.
Oh, cool. All righty. Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, looking great.
Okay, cool. So yeah, anyway, this just mentions some stuff that I already talked about. And what I want to do, though, is talk about Thunkable. So a couple things. It is a visual blocks language inspired by App Inventor. The founders were MIT students. And then they basically kind of took App Inventor and built this new system, and they have a company called Thunkable, and it's really cool. It's based in San Francisco. Some of the nice things, it's multi-platform pretty smoothly, so you can do iPhone, iPad, Android, and you can even do web apps now with Thunkable. The user interface is pretty snazzy, and the ones you can create are also, you can kind of fancy them up pretty well. And one thing we're going to focus on today is these things called cloud variables, which really simplify kind of database coding and also apps where data gets shared. Okay, so some of the questions we had, how do I create a database for login, sign in? How do you store info in a database? Do you need to save everything? What needs to be stored in the database? And then kind of, should I use Firebase or Airtable? And I'll try to address some of these as we talk. Okay, first thing is, there's a few options in Thunkable in terms of database. Firebase, I think, gives the simplest way to do things. And these things called cloud variables, a very innovative feature in Thunkable, and essentially you can change a variable, and Thunkable kind of automatically changes the database for you. So you don't even have to worry about kind of the back. You have to worry about a little bit, but not as much as with most coding. Airtable's nice too. It's got a spreadsheet user interface, but it's a little more complicated to access the data. And I do have a link for an example with Airtable that you can take a look at. And if you want to do images, I believe the best way to do that in Thunkable right now is there's this media DB component, and you also have to use a third-party app called Cloudinary to do it. Okay, I just wanted to mention this video series. It's up to, I think, 14 videos or something, and basically I go through and code a social app with Thunkable. And a lot of stuff I'm talking about today, you can get to using this video. Okay, so what's Firebase is this kind of web database. So it lives in the cloud. It's a Google tool. It's really easy to use. You know, when you hear a database, sometimes like, oh, it's going to be really complicated. It's not so bad. There is some configuration you have to do, but it's pretty good. Thunkable makes it real easy to connect to such a database. And I think that's one of the nice things. The other thing Firebase does for you is it can handle user authentication. It can make login really easy, you know, compared to if you had to do it completely from scratch on your own. Like, you don't have to worry about like creating a database for user and password. It kind of gets done for you with Firebase. Okay, so I just want to go through the steps. And so login is, you know, it's always the same pretty much, right? You want to be able to register or log in, and pretty much the behavior is same on every site. So what I have, and it's a riff off one from Thunkable, is kind of a template you can use. And essentially the link is right here to get this, to get the template. So you can grab this link, and what you're basically going to do is, that's an app, a Thunkable app. You can go there by going to that link, and then you can just save the screen from that app to a little place that Thunkable lets you save your own screens. And then you can open the app you want to put it in and kind of bring it back in. Okay, so let me just kind of show that process. Whoops, sorry. So bit.ly thunk login. So I'm going to come over to Thunkable, and I'm just going to type that in.
For those of you in our live chat, the link is in the chat.
Oh, cool. And so, you know, this is just a really, this app doesn't do much except allow you to log in. All right. So the main screen does nothing. Okay. But this Dave's login screen is kind of the screen you want. And there's this little icon over here. When you choose the screen, this icon's there. If you click it, you can save this screen to your own screens. Like, it's your library of screens. It's a way to kind of reuse code in Thunkable. I've already done it, so I'm not going to do that, but you would click save, and then you would have it in your app, or not in your app, but in your screens. Okay, once you do that, let me go back to the side I was looking at. So then when you're on the app that you want to have a login screen, this little plus button is where you can add a new screen. And then in Thunkable, you can either create a blank one or copy from my screens. And if you do that, you click next, and you'll notice I got a bunch of them, right? But if you go through this process, you'll have one of them. Click it, and it'll bring that into your app. Okay, I'll just go ahead and do Dave's login screen here and copy it. And you know, now I've got my main screen and I've got my login screen. Okay. One thing you want to do, I'm not going to do it right now, is you kind of want to come over, and I'm just going to, so here's my two screens. You generally want your login screen to show up first. And so you'll just drag it up where it shows up first. And when you do that and you run the app, you'll notice over here, I'm showing, I have an iPad running right now, and the iPad's being projected onto my screen. So anyway, the screen showing up is my iPad, okay? And so when this app runs, the login screen's now the first thing. I'm gonna move that back though, because in the next stuff we do, I don't want that to be like that. So now I've got screen one as my main screen. Okay, just real briefly, if you haven't used Thunkable, there's an app on iPad, Android, or on your iPhone, and you get the app. It's called Thunkable Live, and it's the way you can test your apps, and it's really cool. As you change things over here at thunkable.com, the test app changes immediately, right? So you can kind of test your app as you go. It's a really nice feature of Thunkable. All right, let me go back. So anyway, that was just kind of how to add a login page.
Hey, Dave, sorry to cut you off. That was a really interesting point about being able to test live. Can you just kind of reiterate how students would access that kind of window to live test?
Okay, good. Yeah, so I happen to be projecting my iPad up here, which you don't need to do that at all, right? So typically you'll just have your iPad or your iPhone, and as you run or as you build your app, you can just, it'll change as you go. But the main thing is on your computer, you go to thunkable.com, and then on your device, you have to open this thing called Thunkable Live. And it pretty much just, it works pretty easily. It's a pretty nice feature.
Awesome. So Thunkable Live on your testing device. That's great.
Correct.
Thanks,
and you
Dave.
can get that on either Android or iPhone. Okay, the last thing you need to do as far as logins is set up authentication at firebase.com. So right now, I have this pretty login page, right? But it doesn't really do any login. And so what you have to do for that is go to firebase.com. And I have a window up. Let's see. So here's Firebase. And it's a little bit tricky, but it's, just setting a few items and setting up a project on Firebase, and things work pretty well. So I'll just kind of go through the process. I'm going to add a project, and I'm just going to call this one my test app for Techno. All right, and I'm not going to choose analytics because this is just kind of a test. So you want to say no to that, and then you're going to create a project. And it takes a little time, and it's just setting up your project at Firebase. And so you got to, in your mind, just think of, you've got your Thunkable app, and you've got this corresponding Firebase app, and they're going to talk to each other, and they're going to handle the login stuff, and then also your database is going to be there. So I'll go ahead and continue, and it comes to this window. And the first thing you're going to do for your project, and it's a little bit weird, but you're going to set up a web connection, a web project. And that's because your database lives on the web, even though you're building an app, but this is what you do to get started. And so you can just give it a nickname here, and don't check that box. Click register app. Okay, and this is kind of the key point to connecting Firebase to your app. There's two fields you got to grab. One is the API key, and don't grab the quotations, just grab the key. And then when you go over to Thunkable and you choose your this top item, which is your app name, and then you go down and notice the Firebase settings here, and you stick your API key in. Okay, and the only other thing you need is this database URL over at Firebase. So I'm going to Command C to copy it, come back to Thunkable, and there it is. All right, so I've now connected Firebase with my Thunkable app. I'm going to continue to the console, and there's a couple things I could do. One is create a database, which I'll do later, but right now I'm just going to go to authentication, and I'm going to go to sign in method, and there's literally one thing I need to flip, and it's this. When I click edit here, I'm just going to enable email password and click save. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Okay, now my Firebase project knows how to take email passwords. My Thunkable project is connected to my Firebase app, and now when I run this login screen, it will actually, like if someone registers, it'll put their information in that Firebase database. And the next time they come in, it'll check to see if they can log in correctly. Okay, so that's, I mean, it's a few tricky things, right? And it's mainly configuration. It's going to this third-party app, which is Firebase. walking through a few steps, grabbing a few parameters and kind of sticking them in at Thunkable. But all of a sudden you've got all this, you've got login behavior for your app, and it's pretty powerful stuff. And kind of once you go through the process once, you can use it for your other apps as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. So it sounds like this database tool is really powerful. It sounds like we can adapt it to whatever our app is designed to do. Like we have a few questions in the chat right now. Like could we possibly use Firebase for, let's say, a cloud-based storage for high scores in the game?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I'm going to talk about kind of data, here in a second. But yeah, one common use of a database is for what you just mentioned. If you have a game and you want to keep a list of the high scores, you would store them at Firebase. Okay, and you can actually do that without even using Firebase or going to firebase.com. It makes it a lot better if you do that, but I'll also show you a way to kind of do it without even working with Firebase directly. Okay, so I want to address a couple questions, like when do you need a database? And Nick, you kind of brought this up, and it's a little bit subtle, but you need a database to store like when the user enters information, or dynamic information. And like high scores is dynamic information. Like as someone plays, that data gets generated, like their scores, right? So either you've got some input form and the user enters stuff, or you're generating information like a high score. That's when you need a database. And there's two parts of it. One is persistence, right? Like when you close your app and reopen it, you want that data to still be there, right? And the other one is like sharing. When you have two different people using the app, you want them to see, like if I post something or I get a high score, I want Nick to see that I got that high score. I want to brag about it, right?
Right. Beat me again.
Yeah. So how does Thunkable facilitate this stuff? And it's really, I think one of the greatest things about this language is this, what I call, or what they call cloud variables. All right. And the top example here is a regular variable, and it's basically a list of items. And if it's an app variable, that means it's not persistent. It's just like a regular variable in most languages, and whatever data is in it is going to die when you close the app. So if I had a user enter information and I added it to this list, if I close the app and reopen it, what that user did would be gone. But Thunkable provides cloud variables, and those are database variables. So let me just give you a quick example of this. And so I'm running, this is a little app about like supplies at neighborhood stores. And the user can come and like post something like, I don't know, wipes available. And like I said, you're just I'm just entering this from my iPad. So I just entered the information and it shows up in this list, right? And the code for doing that is shown over here. And you'll notice, when the user clicks the post button, it essentially inserts a new item into this variable called posts. Okay, cool, that's great. But if I rerun my app, and one way to kind of simulate rerunning the app is to click live test. So if I click live test, you'll notice on my iPad, the item I just entered is gone, right? Because this variable is not persistent. It's not a cloud variable or even what's called a stored variable. Okay, so I don't want to use this kind of variable for an app where I want to store into a database. And so what I do instead is I create a different variable. I'm going to end up not using this one at all. And I'm going to call this post by user. Okay. And I'm actually going to make it, I just click on that little triangle and notice stored. Stored means I want to store it in a database on the device, so not for sharing. But I'm going to make this a cloud variable. Okay. And all of a sudden, I've got this variable, whatever I do to it is going to actually be stored in a cloud database on Firebase. Okay, and I don't even have to really worry about making that happen, explicitly. Okay, I do need to change my code though, of course. When my screen opens, I'm going to want to show post by user. Okay, but there's a little bit tricky part is you'll notice I can't initialize this variable. Like there's no slots here like there is with an app variable. So I have to do something when the screen opens, and you gotta envision kind of two things. One is the first time someone uses this app, there's nothing in this list. And then every other time there will be stuff in it. So what I'm going to do is grab an if statement. And in my if statement, I'm essentially going to check if post by user is null. So null is kind of the computer science term for empty or nothing there. And what I'm going to ask is my variable cloud post by user, is that null? Okay, and if it is null, then I'm going to set my variable and I'm going to set it to a list of one item. Okay, when I drag this list block, I can kind of get rid of items if I want. So I'm going to get rid of those items. And what I'm going to put in here is just a kind of a default entry like, welcome or something. Whoops, sorry. And I'll just say welcome here. And then I'm just going to grab this and do that. So if my cloud variable is null, so the first time I use this, it's going to be null. I'm going to set it to a list with one item. And otherwise, I'm just going to show whatever's in the list into my list over here. Okay, and I think if I rerun this app, I've got an empty list over here now. Oh, sorry, I need to show post by user. So now I think if I rerun it, I should get my welcome over there, but I'm not sure why that's not happening. Anyway, let's continue. So you do have to do this one kind of tricky piece of code. It always looks about the same. And what you do is you check to see if your variable's null. If it is, you set it to a list with one item, and then you go ahead and show the list. Okay. Now, obviously, when someone enters something, I'm going to need to change the variable which I'm using. So notice I'm no longer using this variable called posts, but I'm using my post by user variable. And because it's a cloud variable, it's going to be persistent. Okay, I'm going to try to test this. I don't know if this is going to work because that first thing wasn't working, but I'll just see if it does. So I'll say TP is available. And if I say post it, yeah, somehow I've got a problem here. So sorry, live demo not working too well today. Sorry about that.
No problem. So Dave, you're saying it's okay to make mistakes and kind of
Yeah, that is what I'm saying.
Troubleshoot
Yeah,
and work on them as you go. See, everyone, even the experts, gotta work through
that's right. That's
these
right.
little pain points.
Let me bring up the kind of working version of this, so we can at least see what it should do. And now if I run this guy, and I've got to sign in, so I'll click sign in. Okay, and so this has a bunch of items, and if I touch and just add a new item and touch post it, then it appears. And this also puts in the person's email and the date in here on when you post stuff. And notice if I rerun this, I've got to sign in again, but the item I just added is still there, so it's persistent. And just to show the blocks, oh sorry, wrong screen. So that main screen we were looking at, then the screen opens, looks pretty much what I did just a second ago. You have to be very careful when you do this screen opens this one tricky piece of code, because you can get the persistent variable messed up if it gets messed up right at the start. But anyway, this is the code you want to do that, and essentially that just checks if this variable's null, set it to some single item list, and then show the list. Okay, so anyway, that's how to kind of set up a cloud variable. And the nice thing is it's stored in the database kind of automatically for you, and you don't have any fixed data, but you've got all the data from the end user. Okay, so anyway, that's at least a brief intro to these cloud variables. And here in this presentation, you kind of see the code you need when the screen opens. So this screen opens event gets triggered every time you launch the app, and essentially you got to just check to see if the database is empty, and or the database variable is empty, and if it is, set it to an initial one. If it's not, if there's already stuff there, then you're good to go. Okay, the other thing with cloud variables, part of it is data sharing. All right, and it's kind of conceptually, you got to think about two or more people using your app. And in the screen, I've got Kira, Bill, and Sally, right? And they have all got the same copy, the same exact app, but a different instance of it. Okay, so let's say Kira posts something, and the variable post by user, something gets added to it. Somehow you need Bill and Sally to get notified. And so you have in your code, you have to actually code it so when they get notified, they can kind of update their user interface, right? So Nick or Bill enters something, or Kira enters something, Bill wants to see what she entered immediately. All right, and in fact, in Thunkable, they've got this when some variable changes event. And typically what you're going to do in there is just kind of update your user interface. In this case, I'm saying, I want to show my list viewer with this kind of updated post by user. And it looks kind of funny because in the code, you don't see that the change was made. But really, when Kira, on her app, this button click happened, the post-it button, something got inserted. And then for everybody else, this event's going to get triggered kind of automatically. And then they just need to update their user interface. All right. So essentially you just need to understand that there's this one extra event you need to handle when you use a cloud variable, but it's very powerful because that's how data sharing can happen. And, when you're using, Instagram or some social app and it updates without you doing anything, this is the kind of event that makes that happen. Okay, so connecting your database to Firebase, and this is, so you can kind of do, build something like we built and have these cloud variables and never even go to Firebase. But you need to go to Firebase for the login. But it's also good to connect your database where you can actually go and see what's in the database. It's very nice. And you could also manage it over there, right? You could go delete things as the kind of app manager. Setup's a little tricky, but you can do it in a few minutes. Guys, how are we doing time-wise?
I think we're doing well, and I think this section's really important for some of our viewers today, because I know there's a lot of questions coming about Firebase and leaderboards, and I think this is starting to really touch on that specifically.
Okay, yeah, good. So I'm going to go back to Firebase, and remember I set up the authentication over here, but I also need to do a few things to set up my database. Okay, and I haven't set one up yet. So you got to kind of, there's a Firebase project, and within that project, you've got authentication and you can create a database. And so I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to click on create database, and I'm going to start in production mode. You can change the test, but I think the easiest way is start in production mode. And then I'm going to click next. And you have to choose a location. And this is basically, which Google server farm is your database going to live on? Okay, I don't think it's real important, but I'll choose US West because that's where I am. And then I'm going to click done. And it takes just a 10, 15 seconds, I think, to kind of set up this database. It's literally kind of setting up some files and a database in some server farm for you that Google's going to take care of, right? In the old days, we'd have to have a server in our apartment and we'd have to do all the configuration and connections ourselves. Okay, so I've got my database, and all I need to do is set one thing in the rules. Okay, and there's one very important thing that you got to make sure you do, and this is a bug my students often have, is you need to choose real-time database. Thunkable works with there's two kinds of Firebase databases, Cloud Firestore and real-time database, and you need to choose real-time Firebase. Okay, and then you can change your rules, and you just need to change this both to true, at least to start out. Just to get something up and running, we're just going to make basically this a public database. No one else is going to know how to get here anyway, and this will allow your app to get to it. Okay. The other tricky thing is make sure you push publish here, and then once that's published, you're all set up. So remember before I did the one configuration thing where I set up the Firebase settings. Okay, so you need to make sure you set those two Firebase settings. And then once you do that though, and once you set up this database, then all your cloud variables, all your cloud variables, like this guy called post by user, they're going to be stored at this database. Okay. Let me go back to my console. I'll show you what one of those looks like. So if I go to this Coal Valley app, this is the one we were running a second ago. And if I go to database, the nice thing you can do is you can actually see the data from your app. So here's data that's actually been entered, right? And I can actually delete this if I wanted or add stuff. But it's really nice for debugging because as you work on your app and the user uses the app, you can go here and see, oh, what's being stored in the database, which is a really nice feature. So kind of just to review, in Thunkable, you can use cloud variables and not even think about Firebase at all. And you can have a database with persistence and shared data. But if you do go to firebase.com and do some of this configuration stuff, then you can have login and you can kind of go look and see what's in your data. And by manage, I mean, let's say you're the app manager and somebody put in some stupid stuff, you could go over here and delete it directly from the database, something like that. But mostly, for folks out there, working with Technovation, you want to get something up and running, and it's real helpful to see what's really happening in your database.
And is there a way to organize this data after it's in the database?
Yeah, typically you won't organize it with at Firebase. What you'll do is you can organize these variables. So like my variable is just a list of text. Okay, but I could have a list of lists. Thunkable has objects, so I could have a list of more complex objects. But the kind of the most innovative thing about Thunkable is the fact that you can just have regular coding variables. And in most languages, you have those, and then you have this other code which you use to store it in the database. And with Thunkable, you just do things to that variable, whatever that data structure is, and it gets stored automatically, which is really nice feature of Thunkable.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then it's really manipulating this basic function of storing data into Firebase and then being able to work it in a way to match whatever function you want. Like say, again, if I wanted to display high scores, or if I wanted to store user login information or group them in a certain way.
That's right. So like for the high scores example, you would have a variable called high scores. It would be a list where you would insert things into it, right? And as far as the database is concerned, you wouldn't even really worry about it, other than you would go there to be able to see what's in it, right? And of course, you can see what's in it from your app, but your app's going to show you, some portion of your data, right, in a kind of a displayed way. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say about databases, and maybe we can go talk about some more questions with that, or we can talk about some other items if you guys would like.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a good time to move to some of the questions that have been floating around. We did a question earlier. Are you familiar with the polyline or polygon function in Thunkable?
I am not. No. Is that within the Canvas component?
I'm actually unfamiliar with it too, but our user did have some issues working on their public transportation app. They've had some problems with the polyline/polygon function, and they couldn't make it work for multiple points. But if we're not familiar with this function ourselves, is there how would you usually go about researching something you're not sure of, Dave? Like,
yeah, good. So one thing that Thunkable has, which is really nice, they do have kind of the help, right? And you can go to documentation, and you can kind of find things in here. They also have a very nice community. So if I go back to Thunkable and click on community, and this is basically a board that you could search for things. Like I could type in Polygon here, and I might find a bunch of stuff on using polygons in Thunkable. Now, Nick, I know one thing you mentioned in that question was trying to get is trying to get the distance between 2 points. Was that part of that question?
Uh,
Or am I thinking of something different?
I think you're thinking of a pre-question, Dave, but that
Okay.
we had a user, a participant that was struggling with distance between 2 points, but
Gotcha.
which we can talk about now if that makes sense. How can I determine the distance between 2 points, two real locations?
Yeah, good. So if you're working with maps and you've got, two latitude, longitude points, there's basically some functions that are fairly complex mathematical functions that will kind of estimate the distance between those 2 points. And it's a little weird because of course you've got hills and, that changes things, right? But you can kind of think of it as how far a crow would have to fly to go between the two points. And I have not coded that in Thunkable, but I did have an example of that in App Inventor. And let me just bring that up here. Let's see. So there's a link here. Determining the distance between 2 points. There is a link here that's at my appinventor.org site. And what it basically has is you have to write the function yourself, okay? And you can find this function, on the internet, or you can look at this link and you can kind of see what the mathematical function is, right? And then in Thunkable, the way you create functions is, you click on this functions drawer and then you can pull out this block, and what you do in this block is you can name it. So I'll call this, distance between points. Okay, and then you can put the blocks in here that you need in order to kind of return the value that you'd want to get. Once you create a function, I realize I haven't created this one, right? It's blank, there's no blocks in it. But once you create the function, you essentially have a new block. Like here's the distance between points block. So, functions are kind of a way to add new blocks to your toolbox. And one thing you could do is do this distance between points. And just to give you a little closer look at what that thing does is, there's some fairly complex math. I know this is hard to see, but it's a fairly complex mathematical operation. And you just have to kind of code that up in blocks to figure out, at least to get an estimate of the distance between 2 points.
Gotcha. Nick, is there a quick question you think we should ask Dave now? I don't know if we want to come back to the logging questions you were answering in the chat to ask Dave's kind of overview opinion, or maybe ask him something else.
Yeah, sure. I think if I can summarize this chat question as well as I could, some people were asking about, with the login feature, can I differentiate my users? Like, let's say one user group has more admin access than the other. How would I go about that in Firebase?
And they're thinking specifically an organization versus an individual that's a part of that organization, and that organization having more capabilities with the login.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I have not delved into Firebase's, kind of the complications with it. Let me bring it up and at least show you where you can get to the user information. But if you go to authentication, and right now it just shows there's just one person who is logged into this sample app of mine, right? You can add users over here, and I think I don't know exactly what else you can do in terms of, trying to get more information from it. But, kind of at Firebase, you can definitely manage things and look at things and see what's all there. At Thunkable, I believe all you can do with the blocks that Thunkable provides is, basically send user and password information to Firebase, and then find out if they logged in or not correctly. So in your code, you can refer basically to the current user, and so you have their information, but you don't have like additional information about your users. And that's of course, Thunkable is is a full, it's a fully powered language, but theoretically it could do anything. But of course they only have blocks for a subset of the world of code, right? So if you were coding with Java or some other language, those languages have huge libraries and are a little bit more general purpose. Thunkable could be completely general purpose, but it just depends on which blocks are available. And they do have lower level blocks called like web API blocks, that do allow you to do anything, but that's a big leap, as far as what kind of coding skills are required. I don't know if I answered that question, but
No, I think you did, definitely provided some helpful context for thinking about that and using Thunkable in the best way.
thanks.
Nick, is there one more question you want to ask, and maybe we could wrap up? We're just past the 45-minute mark.
Yeah, sure. I think probably in the end here, let's go over some maybe general coding tips that Dave might have for everyone out there.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I would say, I know, like with Technovation, the deadline's coming up, and so you got to move pretty quickly. I think, an important thing is, one thing you want to do is be able to pitch an idea, right? So you don't need necessarily a fully completed, refined app. So I think, some of my things I think you should focus on is, what's your most important screen? Like we're talking about logins, and that's nice to have a fancy app where the user can log in, but what's the main screen of your app? And really kind of try to focus on that. And the other thing is, sometimes you can start with kind of prototypical data, right? So maybe you don't have all the user interaction working correctly, but what you want to be able to do is hand this to someone or show it to someone and kind of have it working, and maybe it's kind of working or partially working or even fake working, but you're showing what your idea is of what you've thought of as this great app idea. And sometimes kind of faking some things is a good way, at least on your early versions. Okay, and then you can kind of add the user interaction and the database and the passwords after that. So one thing I tell my students is, perfect is the enemy of good, right? And I think an important thing, and it's real hard in coding, is you need to think big picture, but then you need to think small picture and throw out details. You can't sometimes students will get so caught up in all these details that they're unable to kind of get some core working. And so really try to think about what your core is, get that working, and then start adding in details as you go. So working iteratively, I think, is a key.
That's great. That's great. I love it. And yeah, our community's kind of scrambling towards a May 4th submission deadline. So just to summarize, Dave really emphasizes focus on your main screen. It's great to have all different types of screens mapped out in your app, but really focus on that core screen your users are going to use the most. Start with prototypical data, just as proof of concept, just to be able to get things going. And lastly, just thinking with the phrase "perfect is the enemy of the good." And
I use that one a lot, and even making videos, right? You got to get them out there, and
exactly.
So yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Yeah, Nick, anything else you want to bring up to wrap up? Or I know, yeah, we've covered a lot about databases and user logins. This video will be available, so you can look at Dave's slides. We'll have any of those links he shared available as well. But I think we covered a lot of the questions our community had about how to just think about databases and why and where you use them in building your app.
Yeah, thanks. And I would encourage folks to check out the video series that I linked to, and like whatever bug I had on this live demo, you can check out that video, and that one goes through it and kind of works smoothly. So if there was something weird about the live demo, you can check out that one, and I think that'll be helpful.
That's great. That's great. And as I mentioned, a recorded video resource that Dave also did with our CEO, Tara, that'll be available starting Thursday, April 23rd, tomorrow for us right now that are live, that also will give some more resources for building your apps. Dave, just want to thank you so much for being such a friend of Technovation and such a valuable resource that we're really so thankful to have. So thank you for
thanks
doing
for having
this.
me, Bryant and Nick. Nice working with you, and to all the folks out there, I look forward to seeing what everybody builds, and the pitch nights are some of the most exciting things I've seen in my life. So it's keep working hard.
And what's exciting this year, Dave, is it's all virtual. So it's going to be a more inclusive community than ever. We're going to get to bring everyone together virtually to pitch, to celebrate our work. So we can't wait to have you join and have people around the world joining
awesome.
our
Yeah,
pitch.
Technovation rocks for sure.
Perfect way to end, I think. Technovation does rock, and especially our Technovation girls. So thank you, Dave.
All right, see you. Thank you. Bye-bye.